"Daddy, can we help her?" A black single dad shields a woman from two violent attackers, but the next day, the truth he uncovers shatters everything and puts his own child in danger. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk as James Carter and his daughter Lily made their way home from Wednesday night fellowship. The autumn air held a crisp bite, making James glad he'd remembered to bring Lily's purple jacket. Her small hand felt warm in his larger one as they walked together, her steps bouncing with the tune she hummed. "That was a real nice service tonight," James said, glancing down at his daughter. Her dark braids swayed as she nodded, carefully holding her wrapped cookie in her free hand. "Pastor Mike's jokes were extra funny," Lily giggled, "even if they were kind of silly. And Mrs. Thompson gave me an extra cookie because I helped stack the chairs." James smiled, his heart warming at her innocent joy. "That was mighty kind of her. You saving that cookie for later?" "Uh-huh. For my lunch tomorrow." Lily's face turned serious as she looked up at him. "I heard you talking to Mr. Wilson about work. Are we okay, Daddy?" James's smile faltered slightly. Leave it to his perceptive girl to pick up on his worries. The auto shop had been slower lately, and with winter coming, he knew heating bills would stretch their budget thin. But he didn't want Lily carrying those adult concerns. "We're just fine, baby girl," he assured her, squeezing her hand. "The shop's a little quiet right now, but it always picks up when folks start having car trouble in the cold weather. God's taking care of us, just like he always does." "I know," Lily said with complete confidence. "I pray about it every night, and I put my quarter in the offering plate today. That helps too, right?" James had to swallow past the sudden tightness in his throat. "That helps more than you know, sweetheart. Your mama would be so proud of your giving heart." They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments, their footsteps echoing softly on the concrete. The streets were quiet at this hour, most houses showing only the blue flicker of evening television through their windows. Their own home was just a few blocks away now. "Did you see my spelling test today?" Lily asked, swinging their joined hands. "I got all the words right, even necessary," Mrs. Miller said. A muffled cry cut through the night air, stopping them both mid-step. James froze, listening intently. The sound came again. A desperate "Help!" from the alley between Henderson's Hardware and the old pharmacy building. James's heart began to pound as his protective instincts kicked in. The voice was female, clearly distressed. He could hear other sounds now, too, the scuff of shoes on pavement, angry male voices speaking too low to make out the words. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper, her grip on his hand tightening. She'd stopped humming, her earlier cheerfulness replaced by worry. James quickly assessed their surroundings. The street was empty, no other pedestrians in sight. The hardware store had closed hours ago, its windows dark. His first instinct was to hurry Lily home to safety, but he couldn't ignore someone in trouble. His late wife's voice seemed to whisper in his memory. "The Lord puts us where we're needed, James. We just have to be brave enough to answer the call." Looking down at his daughter's concerned face, James spoke in a calm, firm voice that belied his racing pulse. "Lily, I need you to stay very close to me, okay? Someone needs help, and we can't just walk away. You remember what Pastor Mike said about being God's hands and feet?" Lily nodded solemnly, her cookie forgotten as she pressed closer to his side. Another cry echoed from the alley, more desperate this time. James took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "Hold tight to my hand, baby girl. Don't let go no matter what." Heart thundering in his chest, James turned toward the alley, his steps quick but measured. He could feel Lily's small hand trembling in his, but she kept pace bravely beside him. The shadows grew deeper as they approached the mouth of the alley, and James sent up a silent prayer for strength and wisdom. He wasn't a large man, but years of mechanical work had kept him strong. Still, he had no idea what they were walking into, and his daughter's safety weighed heavily on his mind. But he also knew he had to set an example for Lily about doing what was right, even when it was frightening. As they drew closer to the alley's entrance, the sounds became clearer, a woman's frightened breathing, male voices growing more distinct. James's jaw clenched as he caught fragments of their words, ugly slurs that made his skin crawl. He'd heard those same hateful terms thrown his own way more times than he cared to remember. "Daddy?" Lily whispered again, her voice small but steady. James looked down at his daughter, drawing strength from her trust in him. Her brown eyes were wide but determined, so much like her mother's had been. He gave her hand one more reassuring squeeze before turning toward the darkness of the alley. "Stay close, baby," he said softly. "We're going to help." Then, with his heart in his throat and his daughter's hand firmly in his, James stepped forward into the shadows, moving toward the sounds of someone in desperate need of help. James sprinted into the dimly lit alley, his heart pounding against his ribs. Two men had a young woman pressed against the rough brick wall. Her white blouse was torn at the shoulder, and terror filled her wide eyes. One man gripped her arms while the other covered her mouth with his hand. "Hey!" James's deep voice boomed through the narrow space. Without hesitation, he charged forward, grabbing the closest attacker by his jacket and yanking him backward. "Get off her!" The man stumbled, caught off balance, and James used the momentum to shove him hard against the opposite wall. The second attacker released the woman's mouth, spinning to face James with clenched fists. "Mind your own business," the first man snarled, recovering his footing. His breath reeked of alcohol as he lunged forward. James stepped between them and the woman, his stance solid from years of playing high school football. "This is my business now. Back off." The second attacker, wearing a red baseball cap, threw a wild punch. James blocked it with his forearm, decades of dealing with garage equipment having kept him strong. The impact stung, but he held his ground. Lily's scream pierced the night air. "Help! Somebody help us!" Her young voice echoed off the brick walls, startling everyone. The woman, whom James could now see was probably in her early 30s, slid down the wall, her legs shaking too much to hold her up. The first attacker grabbed his friend's arm. "Come on, man. It ain't worth it." But his partner yanked free, rage twisting his features as he charged at James again. James met him head on, catching the man's shoulders and using his own momentum to spin him away. The attacker crashed into a metal trash can, sending it clattering across the pavement. "Daddy," Lily cried out, her voice trembling. "Stay back, baby," James commanded, not daring to take his eyes off the threats. His daughter's presence made his heart race faster. He had to end this quickly. Suddenly, a bright light flooded the alley. The porch light from the house next door clicked on, and a door creaked open. "What's going on out there?" a gruff voice called out. The two attackers exchanged quick glances. The one in the red cap spat on the ground. "This ain't over," he growled before both men took off running toward the other end of the alley. James waited until they disappeared around the corner before turning to the woman. She had curled into herself, arms wrapped tightly around her knees, entire body trembling. Tears streaked her face, and a bruise was already forming on her cheek. "Ma'am?" James kept his voice gentle, not wanting to frighten her further. "Are you hurt? Should I call an ambulance?" The woman shook her head slightly, then winced at the movement. "No, I don't think." Her voice cracked, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Lily had inched closer, still clutching her wrapped cookie. Her small face was filled with concern as she tugged at James's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, her brown eyes wide with worry. "Can we help her?" The woman looked up at Lily's words, meeting the little girl's compassionate gaze. Something in her expression softened, and she tried to wipe away her tears with shaking hands. "Your hands are bleeding," Lily said softly, pointing to where the woman's palms had been scraped raw from the brick wall. James knelt down, keeping a respectful distance. "My house is just 2 blocks away. We can get you cleaned up, call the police if you want, or I can call someone to come get you, family, friends." The woman drew in a shuddering breath. I just moved here. I don't really know anyone yet." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm Lily," his daughter said, taking a small step forward. "What's your name?" "Emily," the woman answered, managing a weak smile. "I'm Emily Sanders." James kept his movements slow and deliberate as he shrugged off his jacket. "Here, Miss Sanders. You're shaking." He held the jacket out to her, waiting for her to take it rather than moving into her space. Emily reached for the jacket with trembling fingers. "Thank you, Mr. Carter, James Carter, and you've met my daughter Lily." He stood up slowly, scanning the alley again to make sure the attackers hadn't returned. "Can you stand?" Emily nodded, but when she tried to push herself up, her legs buckled. James caught her elbow, steadying her while being careful not to grab too firmly, too aware of what she'd just been through. "Easy now," he murmured. "Take your time." Lily held out her wrapped cookie. "Would you like my cookie, Miss Sanders? Mama always said, sweet things help when you're scared." Emily's eyes welled up again at the child's innocent offering. "That's very kind of you, sweetheart, but you keep it." She pulled James's jacket tighter around her shoulders. I think I'd like to take you up on that offer to clean up, if it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," James assured her, keeping his hand hovering near her elbow as she took an unsteady step. "Lily, honey, walk ahead of us and keep your eyes open, okay?" His daughter nodded solemnly, clutching her cookie close as she led the way out of the alley. James watched Emily carefully as they followed, ready to catch her if her legs gave out again. The neighbor's porch light still blazed behind them, a silent witness to the night's events. James guided Emily up the cracked concrete steps of his modest two-story home, his weathered key ring jingling in the darkness. Lily hadn't let go of Emily's trembling hand since they left the alley, offering silent comfort with her small, warm fingers. The yellow porch light cast long shadows across their faces, and crickets chirped in the overgrown flower beds that James kept meaning to tend to. "It's not much," James said softly, pushing open the solid wooden door. "But you'll be safe here." Emily nodded, her shoulders still shaking. Her mascara had left dark streaks down her cheeks, and her blouse remained torn at the shoulder. James flicked on the living room lights, revealing walls painted in warm beige, decorated with family photos and Lily's colorful artwork. A well-worn leather couch dominated the space, flanked by mismatched end tables holding various reading lamps. "Lily, honey," James said, "can you get Miss Emily some water while I find a blanket?" "Yes, Daddy." Lily squeezed Emily's hand one last time before scampering to the kitchen, her small feet padding across the hardwood floors. James retrieved a soft blue blanket from the hall closet, one his late wife Sarah had crocheted years ago. The familiar pattern of shells and clusters brought a brief ache to his chest, but he pushed the feeling aside. Right now, someone needed help. Emily sank into the couch, accepting the blanket with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered, wrapping it around her shoulders. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." Her voice cracked, and fresh tears welled in her eyes. Lily returned with a glass of water, carefully holding it with both hands to avoid spilling. She offered it to Emily, who took small sips between shaky breaths. James settled into his armchair, keeping a respectful distance. "Do you have someone we can call? Family? Friends?" Emily shook her head, dabbing at her eyes with the corner of the blanket. "No, I just moved here last month. I'm teaching 4th grade at Pine Grove Elementary." She attempted a weak smile. "I wanted a fresh start in a small town." Funny how that worked out. Lily perched on the arm of the couch, her face bright with interest despite the late hour. "You're a teacher?" "My teacher is Mrs. Thompson. Do you know her?" "Lily," James said gently, "let Miss Emily rest a bit." "It's okay," Emily said, managing a genuine, if watery, smile. "Yes, I know Mrs. Thompson. She's been very kind to me." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, looking small and lost in its folds. James studied her carefully. The thought of sending her back out into the night, alone and scared, didn't sit right with his conscience. "We have a guest room upstairs," he said. "It's simple, but you're welcome to stay tonight. We can figure things out in the morning." Relief flooded Emily's face, followed quickly by uncertainty. "I couldn't impose." "You're not imposing," James assured her. "It's what neighbors do." "Can I show her the room, Daddy?" Lily bounced on her toes, already heading for the stairs. "Please?" James nodded, and Lily took Emily's hand again, leading her up the carpeted steps. The guest room was small but neat, with a twin bed covered in a patchwork quilt and a wooden dresser beneath a window that overlooked the backyard. "Wait here." Lily disappeared into her room across the hall, returning moments later with a well-loved stuffed rabbit, its fur worn smooth from years of hugs. "This is Mr. Hoppy. He helps me sleep when I'm scared." Emily's eyes welled up again as she accepted the toy. "Are you sure? He looks very special." "He is," Lily said solemnly. "That's why he's perfect for tonight." James felt his throat tighten at his daughter's kindness. "There are clean towels in the bathroom next door," he said, "and Lily's room is right across the hall if you need anything. I'm at the end of the hallway." Emily clutched Mr. Hoppy to her chest, looking between father and daughter with grateful eyes. "I don't know how to thank you both." "No thanks needed," James said. "Get some rest." After making sure Emily was settled, James tucked Lily into bed, kissing her forehead and praising her generosity. Then he retreated to his own room, where Sarah's photograph sat on his nightstand. In it, she was laughing, her head thrown back, joy radiating from her face. The picture had been taken at their church picnic, just months before the cancer took her. James sank to his knees beside the bed, his hands clasped together. "Sarah," he whispered, "I hope I'm doing the right thing. Help me be strong. Help me protect our baby girl. And," he glanced toward the guest room, "help me know how to help someone who needs it, just like you always did." The photograph seemed to smile back at him in the dim light, and James felt a familiar ache in his chest, not quite as sharp as it used to be, but still present. He touched the frame gently before rising to prepare for bed, knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges. Golden morning light spilled through the kitchen windows, warming the worn linoleum floor of the Carter home. Lily moved with determined purpose, her small hands carefully arranging 3 plates on the square wooden table. The gentle clink of dishes and silverware filled the usually quiet morning routine. James watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee mug in hand, as his daughter meticulously straightened each fork. The sight of that third-place setting made his chest tighten. They hadn't set 3 plates since Sarah passed. "Daddy, do we have syrup?" Lily asked, opening cabinet doors. "Miss Emily needs to try your special pancakes." "Bottom shelf, sweetheart," James replied, moving to the stove where a stack of golden brown pancakes waited. The familiar scent of vanilla and cinnamon wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Soft footsteps in the hallway drew their attention. Emily appeared in the doorway, wearing the same clothes from the night before, though she'd clearly tried to smooth them out. Her face was clean of makeup now, revealing a bruise forming near her temple. "Oh, no, please, you've already done so much," Emily protested, holding up her hands. "I should really get going." "You have to stay for breakfast," Lily exclaimed, rushing over to take Emily's hand. "Daddy makes the best pancakes in the whole world. Even Pastor Mike says so." Emily hesitated, looking between Lily's eager face and James's steady gaze. "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," James said quietly, sliding 3 pancakes onto a plate. "Please, join us." Lily pulled Emily to the table, practically bouncing as she pushed in her chair. "Sit here, next to me." Her enthusiasm brought a small smile to Emily's tired face. James set the plates down, and Lily immediately passed the syrup to their guest. "Thank you," Emily murmured, her hands still trembling slightly as she poured. "Are you feeling better?" Lily asked, cutting into her pancakes. "I heard you crying in the night, but Mr. Bunny helps with bad dreams. That's why I let you borrow him." Emily's cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry if I woke you. And yes, Mr. Bunny was very helpful." She took a small bite of pancake, and her eyes widened. "These are amazing." "Told you," Lily beamed. "Daddy learned from Mommy. She used to make them every Sunday." Her voice carried no sadness, just matter-of-fact acceptance that made James's heart ache. "You're a teacher, right?" James asked, gently steering the conversation. "Lily mentioned you said something about that last night." Emily nodded, seeming grateful for the change in subject. "Yes, 5th grade at Madison Elementary. I just started this semester." She took another bite, then added, It's been challenging, but the children are wonderful. That's my school, Lily exclaimed. I'm in 4th grade with Miss Thompson, but sometimes I see Miss Sanders in the hallway. She always smiles and says hello. James noticed how Emily's face lit up when talking about her students. Yesterday, we were learning about the solar system, she shared, animation creeping into her voice. One of my students, Marcus, brought in this amazing model he built with his grandfather. The whole class was so excited. Lily hung on every word, asking questions about the planets and stars. James watched them interact, seeing how naturally Emily engaged with his daughter. There was a gentleness in her responses, a teacher's patience mixed with genuine interest. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the kitchen table. James found himself relaxing despite the circumstances, drawn into their conversation about school projects and favorite books. Lily was more animated than he'd seen her in months, her laughter filling the kitchen like music. Too soon, Emily glanced at the clock on the wall. I really should get going, she said, standing to help clear the plates despite James's protests. I need to change before school, and I've taken up so much of your morning already. But you'll come back, right? Lily asked, hope plain in her voice. Before Emily could respond, they heard the scrape of car tires outside. James moved to the window, his coffee mug freezing halfway to his lips. Emily's small blue sedan sat in the street where they'd left it last night, but now angry red letters sprawled across the driver's side door. Emily followed his gaze and gasped. The mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor as she read the message, "Leave or else." Lily jumped at the sound of breaking ceramic, but James barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on Emily's face, watching as the color drained from her cheeks. The peaceful morning shattered like the mug at their feet, leaving only the harsh reality of hatred painted across Emily's car. "Oh, God," Emily whispered, her hand covering her mouth. She stood frozen, staring out the window at the violent message waiting for her. Emily sat trembling on the worn wooden porch steps, her shoulders hunched against the morning chill. Lily pressed close against her side, one small hand wrapped tightly around Emily's arm as if trying to anchor her in place. The morning that had started so peacefully now felt brittle and sharp. James stood in the driveway, his broad shoulders tense as he studied the cruel letters sprayed across Emily's white sedan. The red paint dripped like angry tears down the driver's side door. His mechanic's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, a subtle sign of the anger building within him. "I should have told you everything last night," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry to bring this to your home, to your family." James turned from the car, his expression carefully controlled as he walked back to the porch. "Tell me now." Lily scooted closer to Emily, her dark eyes wide with concern. Emily drew in a shaky breath, gathering her courage. "It started 3 weeks ago in my 4th grade class. One of my students, Marcus Thompson, was picking on David Williams. He's one of only 3 black students in the whole school." Emily's fingers twisted in her lap. The bullying was getting worse each day, notes with horrible words, pushing in the hallway, stealing his lunch. James nodded slowly, recognizing the familiar pattern. He'd seen it too many times before, had lived through it himself. "I reported it to the principal," Emily continued, her voice growing stronger. "I documented everything. When that didn't help, I called Marcus's parents in for a conference." She swallowed hard. "His father, he got in my face. Started yelling about how I was targeting his son, how I had no right to accuse him of anything." "Daddy," Lily whispered, "that's not fair. Miss Emily was just helping." James rested his hand on Lily's shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Go on," he said to Emily. "After that, things started happening. My tires were slashed last week. Someone broke my classroom window over the weekend, then last night." Her voice cracked. "Those men, they were waiting for me. One of them was Marcus's uncle. I recognized his voice." James sat down heavily on the porch step, creating a protective barrier between Emily and the street. The weight of her words settled over them like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. This was about deep-rooted hatred finding a new target. "Have you gone to the police?" he asked, though he already knew the answer from the way she dropped her gaze. "They said without proof, there's nothing they can do, just my word against theirs." Emily's laugh was hollow. "They suggested maybe I should be more understanding of local sensitivities." Lily's face scrunched up in confusion. "What does that mean, Daddy?" James felt that familiar burn of anger and frustration in his chest, the same feeling he got every time he had to explain the ugliness of prejudice to his daughter. "It means some people think it's okay to be mean to others just because they're different," he said carefully. "And sometimes other people let them get away with it." Emily wiped at her eyes. "I thought about quitting, moving somewhere else, but then I look at David's face every morning when he walks into my classroom, trying so hard to be brave." She straightened her shoulders. "I can't let them win. I won't." The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the yard. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance. James studied Emily's profile, the determination in her jaw, despite the fear in her eyes. He recognized that look. He'd seen it in his late wife's face years ago, when she'd refused to back down from fighting injustice in their community. "You need to file a police report about last night," James said firmly. "I'll go with you as a witness. And that car," he glanced at the vandalized vehicle, "I can help clean it up at my shop." "I can't ask you to get involved," Emily protested. "You have Lily to think about. These people, they're dangerous." "Daddy always says doing the right thing isn't always easy," Lily piped up, her young voice full of conviction. "But that's why it's important to do it anyway." James felt a surge of pride at his daughter's words, even as worry gnawed at his stomach. She was right, of course. But the thought of putting her in harm's way made his heart clench. "Stay with us another night," he found himself saying. "At least until we can figure out a better plan. You shouldn't be alone right now." Emily started to protest again, but Lily's face lit up. "Please stay, Miss Emily. I can show you my books, and we can make cookies and—" "Lily," James interrupted gently, "let's give Miss Emily some space to think about it." Emily looked between them, Lily's hopeful face and James's steady gaze, and slowly nodded. "Just one more night," she agreed quietly. "Thank you." Later, after Emily had gone to lie down and Lily was occupied with her homework, James stood at the kitchen window. His wife's favorite wind chimes tinkled softly in the breeze, and he could almost hear her voice asking what he was afraid of. The answer weighed heavy in his chest. He was afraid of the hatred that could turn ordinary men into monsters, afraid of the violence that could erupt without warning. Most of all, he was afraid for Lily, his precious daughter, who saw the world with such pure, unflinching hope. But as he watched Lily through the doorway, carefully drawing hearts around the edges of her math homework, he wondered if sometimes the biggest risk was in teaching her to turn away from what was right, just because it was hard. The evening shadows crept across the living room as Lily bounced on her toes, clutching a well-worn storybook to her chest. Her eyes sparkled with hope as she looked up at Emily, who sat curled in the corner of the old floral couch. "Would you please read to me? Pretty please?" Lily held out the book, its pages dog-eared from countless bedtime readings. "Daddy does the voices, but sometimes he's too tired." Emily glanced at James, seeking permission. He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Go ahead. It's her favorite." "The Princess and the Garden," Emily read the title aloud, patting the space beside her. Lily scrambled up, snuggling close like she'd known Emily forever. James watched them settle in, then quietly stepped into the hallway. He leaned against the wall just outside Lily's room, listening as Emily's voice carried softly through the open door. She read with natural warmth, changing her tone for each character, making the story come alive. "But the princess knew that love could make any garden grow," Emily read, and Lily sighed contentedly. The sound transported James back to evenings when Marie, his late wife, would read to Lily. The same gentle cadence, the same way of bringing magic to simple words. His chest tightened with an unexpected ache. "And so she planted hope, one seed at a time," Emily continued, her voice painting pictures of flowering vines and blooming roses. 20 minutes later, Lily's breathing had grown deep and even. Emily's footsteps whispered in the hallway as she emerged, carefully pulling Lily's door almost closed. "She's asleep," Emily whispered, smoothing her sundress. "Thank you for letting me read to her." James gestured toward the kitchen. "Tea?" Emily nodded, following him into the small space where the overhead light cast a warm glow. James filled the kettle, his movements quiet and practiced. "You're very good with her," he said, reaching for 2 mugs from the cabinet. "Lily doesn't usually warm up to people so quickly. She's a special girl." Emily accepted the steaming mug he offered. "She reminds me of some of my students, so open-hearted, so eager to see the good in everyone." James settled into a kitchen chair, his large hands wrapped around his mug. "She gets that from her mother." He paused, studying the steam rising from his tea. "Marie passed 3 years ago. Cancer." Emily's face softened with understanding. "I'm so sorry, James. Some days are harder than others." He traced the rim of his mug. "Raising her alone, trying to give her everything she needs, it's not always easy. But Marie left us with so much love, so much faith. We hold on to that. It shows," Emily said quietly, "in how you care for her, how you protect her." James looked up, meeting Emily's eyes. "Like you tried to protect your student?" Emily's fingers tightened around her mug. "Tommy. He's 10, just like Lily. Some older boys were bullying him, using horrible words, pushing him around. I couldn't just stand by." "No, you couldn't," James agreed, his voice heavy with understanding. "I know something about that kind of hatred, been facing it all my life." "How do you handle it?" Emily asked. "The constant weight of it?" James was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I remember what Marie used to say, that hatred is just fear wearing a mask. And fear," he smiled slightly. "Well, fear's not welcome in this house. We choose faith instead, even when it's hard, especially then." James sipped his tea. "When Marie first got sick, I was angry at God. Couldn't understand why he'd take her from us, but she never lost her faith, not once. Taught me that believing in love, in goodness, that's a choice we make every day." Emily nodded, understanding filling her eyes. "Like choosing to help a stranger in an alley." "Exactly like that." James's voice grew softer. "Marie would have done the same thing. She always said our actions speak louder than our fear." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the tick of the kitchen clock marking time. Through the window, streetlights cast pools of yellow on the quiet street. A car passed slowly, its headlights sweeping across the house, and James found himself watching the shadows it created, knowing somewhere out there, hatred was waiting. "I should check the doors again," he said, rising from his chair. He moved to the window, scanning the darkened street with practiced caution. The shadows seemed deeper tonight, more ominous, and he knew with certainty that their real battle was just beginning. Saturday morning painted the sky in soft pinks and golds as James stood at his kitchen counter, stirring cream into his coffee. The events of the past few days weighed heavy on his mind, but Lily's cheerful humming from the living room brought a small smile to his face. Emily appeared in the doorway, dressed in borrowed clothes that hung slightly loose on her frame, a simple blouse and jeans from the box of his late wife's things he hadn't been able to part with. "I should really head home today," she said quietly, wringing her hands. "Not yet," James replied, his voice firm but gentle. "It's not safe." He glanced at the calendar on the wall, a thought forming. "Actually, it's farmer's market day. Lily loves going. Maybe we could all use some fresh air." From the living room, Lily's head popped around the corner, her eyes bright with excitement. "Can Emily come too? Please, Daddy?" Emily shifted uncertainly. "I wouldn't want to impose." "You wouldn't be," James assured her. "Besides, safety in numbers, right?" The farmer's market sprawled across the town square, a cheerful collection of white tents and colorful produce displays. The morning air carried the mingled scents of fresh bread, flowers, and coffee from the local roaster's stand. Lily skipped ahead, her purple sneakers flashing in the sunlight. "Look, look!" She pointed to a display of honey jars that caught the light like amber jewels. "Can we get some for our tea?" James noticed how Emily relaxed as they wandered between the stalls, her shoulders losing their tension. She showed Lily how to tell if a peach was ripe, teaching her to smell the sweet fragrance near the stem. Her teacher's instincts emerged naturally, turning every moment into a gentle lesson. "James Carter," a warm voice called out. Mrs. Henderson, the choir director's wife, approached with her signature wide smile. "And little Lily, we missed you at Wednesday's practice. Had some unexpected company," James explained, gesturing to Emily. "Emily Sanders." Emily introduced herself, extending her hand. "I'm new in town." Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose slightly, but her smile remained genuine. "Oh, you must be the new fourth-grade teacher everyone's talking about. Welcome to our little community." More church members appeared. The Wilsons with their teenage sons, Deacon Thomas and his wife. Each greeting came with curious glances between James and Emily, unspoken questions hanging in the air. But there was warmth, too, genuine inclusion that made Emily's eyes shine with grateful tears. They stopped at the baker's stall, where Mr. Romano insisted on giving Lily a free cookie. "For my favorite little customer," he said with a wink. "And her family, too." The word family hung in the air, making James's heart skip a beat. Lily split her cookie carefully into 3 pieces, insisting they each take one. The simple gesture of sharing brought them closer together, standing in a small circle in the sunshine. For a moment, they could have been any family enjoying a Saturday morning together. James watched as Emily helped Lily pick out fresh vegetables, showing her how to choose the crispest lettuce and the firmest tomatoes. His daughter's laughter mixed with Emily's gentle instructions, creating a melody that sounded like home. It reminded him of shopping trips with Sarah, Lily's mother, before cancer stole her away. The memory didn't hurt as much as usual. They filled their canvas bags with fresh produce, homemade bread, and a jar of honey that Lily had carefully selected. The market crowd had thinned as noon approached, and James suggested they head home for lunch. Walking back, Lily walked between them, holding both their hands and occasionally swinging herself forward with childish glee. The streets were quiet, peaceful, until the rumble of an engine shattered the calm. A pickup truck roared past them, too close to the curb. James instinctively pulled Lily closer as the driver, a man whose face he recognized but couldn't name, fixed Emily with a cold, hard stare. The truck's engine revved aggressively before it sped away, leaving behind a cloud of exhaust and fear. The peaceful bubble of their morning burst. Emily's face had gone pale, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her shopping bag. James felt his jaw tighten, the familiar weight of worry settling back onto his shoulders. Lily, sensing the change in mood, pressed closer to Emily's side. "Did you see the tomatoes I picked?" she asked, trying to recapture the morning's joy. "They're going to taste so good in our sandwiches." James watched Emily force a smile for Lily's sake, but he could see the fear had returned to her eyes. The simple pleasure of their market outing felt tainted now, reminding them that their problems couldn't be escaped so easily. The old church bell chimed 9 times as James pulled into the parking lot of First Community Church. The white wooden steeple rose against the clear blue sky, just as it had every Sunday for as long as he could remember. But today felt different. Emily sat in the passenger seat, fidgeting with the hem of her floral dress, while Lily bounced excitedly in the back. "You'll love Pastor Miller," Lily declared, unbuckling her seatbelt. "He always gives me candy after service." James caught Emily's nervous smile in the rearview mirror. "You don't have to stay for the whole service if you're not comfortable," he said softly. "No, I want to." Emily smoothed her dress. "It's been too long since I've been to church. I miss it." They walked up the concrete steps together, Lily skipping ahead in her yellow Sunday dress. The familiar creak of the heavy wooden doors welcomed them into the warm, sunlit sanctuary. The smell of coffee and fresh-baked cookies wafted from the fellowship hall. "Emily! Emily!" Lily tugged at her hand. "Come meet Mrs. Johnson. She's my Sunday school teacher." Before Emily could respond, Lily was already pulling her toward a gray-haired woman arranging hymnals in the front pew. James watched as his daughter proudly introduced Emily to everyone within reach. "This is my friend Emily. She's staying with us. She's a teacher just like you, Mrs. Johnson." Most of the congregation greeted Emily warmly. Mrs. Johnson hugged her. The Wheeler family, who sat behind James every Sunday, shook her hand. Even old Mr. Peterson, who rarely spoke to anyone, managed a gruff welcome. But James didn't miss the whispers. As he helped Lily find their usual spot in the middle pews, he caught fragments of hushed conversations. That new teacher causing trouble at the school, bringing outsiders to our church. James Carter should know better. James felt his jaw tighten, but kept his face calm for Lily's sake. Emily sat between them, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The organ music swelled, drowning out the murmurs as Pastor Miller stepped up to the pulpit. "Good morning, brothers and sisters." Pastor Miller's warm voice filled the sanctuary. Today we'll be reading from 1 Corinthians, chapter 13. The familiar rustle of Bible pages filled the air. Lily shared her Bible with Emily, pointing to the verses with her small finger. "Love is patient, love is kind," Pastor Miller read. "It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs." James noticed Emily wiping her eyes as Pastor Miller continued his sermon, speaking about how love was the only answer to hate, how fear could only be overcome by courage and compassion. The pastor's eyes seemed to find them in the congregation as he spoke about standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. In times of trouble, Pastor Miller's voice grew stronger. We must ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? Would he turn away the stranger? Would he ignore injustice? Or would he show love, even to those who hate him? More tears slid down Emily's cheeks. Lily reached over and took her hand, offering her pink pocket tissue. The simple gesture made James's heart ache with pride. After the final hymn, people filed out of the pews for coffee hour. Lily rushed to get her usual post-service candy from Pastor Miller, leaving James and Emily standing in the aisle. "Thank you," Emily said quietly, her voice thick with emotion, "for bringing me today, for everything. I was starting to feel so alone, but here." She gestured to the sanctuary, the sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the wooden floors. James nodded, understanding what she couldn't quite put into words. The church had been his anchor after losing his wife, a place where Lily could still feel her mother's presence in the familiar hymns and prayers. As they turned to follow Lily, James caught sight of Marcus Thompson near the door. The man's face was twisted in a scowl, his eyes fixed on Emily with undisguised hostility. James instinctively stepped closer to Emily, shielding her from Marcus's glare as they made their way to the fellowship hall. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across James's modest backyard as smoke curled up from the charcoal grill. The sweet scent of burning hickory mixed with the promise of dinner hung in the warm air. James stood at the grill, spatula in hand, carefully tending to the burgers that sizzled on the hot grates. Emily worked at the weathered picnic table nearby, her knife making steady rhythmic sounds against the cutting board as she sliced tomatoes and onions. Her auburn hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame her face. Every so often, she'd pause to watch Lily darting across the grass, the little girl's laughter echoing as she chased the first fireflies of the evening. "Don't go too far, sweetheart," James called out, flipping a burger with practiced ease. The meat hissed and popped, releasing another cloud of fragrant smoke. "I won't, Daddy." Lily's voice carried back, her hands cupped around a glowing firefly. "Miss Emily, look what I caught." Emily set down her knife and peered into Lily's small hands. "That's beautiful, Lily. Remember to let it go, though. Even pretty things need their freedom." James watched the interaction, a familiar ache in his chest softening at the sight. The setting sun painted everything in warm golden hues, reminding him of countless summer evenings shared with Sarah before her passing. But for the first time in years, the memory didn't bring just pain. "You're good with her," James said softly, checking the burgers again. "Natural, really." Emily returned to her vegetables, her knife moving more slowly now. I've always loved children. It's why I became a teacher. She paused, then added with a quietness that made James look up. I always thought I'd have my own family by now. The admission hung in the air between them. James moved the burgers to the cooler side of the grill, giving himself time to respond. Life doesn't always go the way we plan, does it? No, Emily agreed, setting aside the tomatoes and starting on a cucumber. I spent my 20s focused on my career, thinking there'd be plenty of time. Then suddenly I was 30, and… She shrugged, trying to make light of it. Well, here I am, sharing Sunday dinner with a kind widower and his daughter instead of my own family. James pulled up a lawn chair near the picnic table, close enough for conversation but maintaining a careful distance. After Sarah passed, I never thought I'd… He cleared his throat, surprised by how difficult the words were to say. I just shut that part of myself away. Figured Lily was all I needed. Emily's hands stilled on the cutting board. That must have been incredibly hard. It was. Still is sometimes. James watched Lily twirling in the yard, her dress spinning out like a flower. Sarah was my high school sweetheart. We faced everything together, the looks, the whispers, people who thought we shouldn't be together because of our different races, but Sarah never cared about any of that. She sounds remarkable, Emily said softly. She was. James smiled, the expression tender with memory. She taught me that love is stronger than fear. That's something I try to remember, especially now with… He gestured vaguely, encompassing their current situation. Emily set down her knife completely, turning to face him. James, I want you to know that I never meant to bring trouble to your door. If I had known… Don't, James interrupted gently. You stood up for what was right. Sarah would have done the same thing. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the space between them. Emily's cheeks flushed slightly, and she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Sometimes I wonder if I'm brave enough for all this. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, James said, standing to check the burgers again. It means you do what's right, despite being scared. Is that what you're doing? Emily asked quietly. The right thing, even though it's scary? James turned from the grill, meeting her gaze steadily. I spent 3 years building walls around my heart, telling myself it was safer that way. Safer for me, safer for Lily. He took a deep breath. But maybe safe isn't always right. The honesty in his voice made Emily's eyes shine with unshed tears. I never expected to find people like you and Lily. You've shown me more kindness in 2 days than I've known in months. From the porch steps, Lily watched them, her small face thoughtful in the gathering dusk. She held her hands clasped together as if in prayer, her lips moving in a whisper that carried on the evening breeze. It's like Mommy sent her. The fireflies danced around them, their gentle lights blinking like stars fallen to earth. The burgers sizzled on the grill, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled the evening hour. In that moment, the backyard felt like sacred ground, a place where broken hearts could begin to heal, where new possibilities could take root in the fertile soil of shared understanding. The church basement buzzed with activity as people arranged folding chairs and set up tables draped in white cloth. Colorful streamers hung from the ceiling pipes, and the smell of fresh-baked cookies and coffee filled the air. James adjusted his tie, a rare sight for the mechanic more comfortable in work clothes. Next to him, Lily twirled in her favorite yellow dress, her braids swinging with each spin. You look beautiful, sweetheart, Emily said, smoothing down Lily's dress. She wore a simple blue dress that made her eyes sparkle, though her fingers kept fidgeting with the hem. You okay? James asked quietly, noticing Emily's nervous energy. You don't have to speak if you're not ready. Emily took a deep breath. I need to do this. These people need to understand what's happening in their own community. Pastor Roberts approached them with his characteristic warm smile. Emily, we're so glad you agreed to share your perspective tonight. Education is close to all our hearts. Lily grabbed Emily's hand. You'll do great. Just pretend you're teaching your class. People filtered in, filling the rows of chairs. James recognized most faces: mechanics from his shop, teachers from Lily's school, families he'd known for years. Some smiled and waved, while others cast curious glances at Emily beside him. When Pastor Roberts called Emily to the podium, James gave her hand a gentle squeeze. She walked forward, her steps steady despite her obvious nervousness. The room grew quiet. "Good evening," Emily began, her teacher's voice carrying clearly through the basement. "I'm fairly new to town, but I've already experienced both the worst and the best of what this community has to offer." She paused, looking directly at James and Lily. Drawing strength from their encouraging smiles, she continued, "In my classroom, I teach children that every person deserves respect and dignity. When I saw one of my students being bullied because of the color of his skin, I couldn't stay silent. I reported it, spoke up against it, and tried to create change." The room stayed silent, hanging on her words. James noticed some people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. That decision made me a target. There are those who believe speaking against racism is worse than racism itself. Emily's voice grew stronger. "But then, when I was attacked, a stranger and his daughter showed me what real community looks like. They offered me shelter, protection, and friendship without hesitation." Lily beamed proudly at the mention of their role, and James felt his chest tighten with emotion. "This church talks about love conquering hate. I've seen that love in action through James and Lily Carter, through the many of you who've welcomed me. But love isn't just warm feelings. It's taking a stand when it matters. It's protecting those who need protection. It's speaking truth even when it costs us something." Several amens rang out from the congregation. Pastor Roberts nodded encouragingly from his seat. "I stand before you today asking not for sympathy, but for action. Our children are watching. They learn from what we do, not just what we say. Will we teach them to stay silent in the face of injustice? Or will we show them that love is stronger than fear?" Emily's voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. "I choose to stay and fight for what's right. I choose to believe in the power of this community, to stand together against hate. I choose love." The silence held for a moment, before someone started clapping. The applause spread quickly, growing into a standing ovation. James stood tall, pride evident in his face as he clapped. Lily jumped up and down, cheering. Mrs. Thompson, one of the eldest church members, made her way to Emily with tears in her eyes. "Child, you've got more courage than most. We're blessed to have you here." Others followed, forming a line to shake Emily's hand or offer hugs. James watched as person after person affirmed their support. Even those who had seemed uncertain earlier approached with words of encouragement. Pastor Roberts took the podium again. "Emily's words remind us that faith without action is dead." Tonight's fundraiser will help support educational programs promoting unity and understanding in our schools. The evening continued with music, food, and conversation. Emily stayed close to James and Lily, her relief evident in her relaxed smile. For the first time since the attack, she looked truly at peace. "Thank you," she whispered to James during a quiet moment. "I couldn't have done this without you both." "You did all the hard work," James replied softly. "We just helped you remember you weren't alone." As the fundraiser wound down, they gathered their things to leave. Lily insisted on holding both their hands as they walked through the church doors into the cool evening air. The streetlights cast a warm glow on the sidewalk, and stars twinkled above in the clear sky. Emily laughed at something Lily said, the sound carrying across the quiet street. James felt a contentment he hadn't experienced in years, walking hand in hand with these two people who had somehow become so important to him. None of them noticed the dark figure standing in the shadows across the street, watching their every move. The porch swing creaked softly as James and Emily swayed in the evening breeze. Stars dotted the clear night sky, and crickets played their gentle symphony in the darkness. The old wooden boards beneath them still held the day's warmth, making the cool night air feel pleasant against their skin. James wrapped his hands around a steaming mug of chamomile tea, letting its warmth seep into his calloused fingers. Emily sat beside him, her own mug resting on her lap, her shoulders finally relaxed after the emotional events at the fundraiser. "Thank you," Emily said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "for standing with me today. I've never felt that kind of support before." James nodded, taking a slow sip of his tea. "You showed real courage up there. Reminded me of Sarah, my wife. She never backed down from doing what was right, either." Emily turned to face him, her expression gentle in the dim porch light. "Will you tell me about her?" James was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. The cricket songs filled the pause. She was sunshine. Had this way of lighting up any room she walked into. Even when things got hard, she'd find something to smile about. He traced the rim of his mug with his thumb. "She taught first grade, just like you. Used to come home with these wild stories about her students. Always saw the best in everyone." "She sounds wonderful," Emily whispered. "She was, when she got sick." James's voice caught slightly. "She worried more about how Lily and I would manage than herself. Made me promise to keep living, not just existing. To be honest, I haven't kept that promise very well." Emily's hand found his in the darkness, warm and steady. "I think you have. Look at how you're raising Lily. Look at how you rushed to help a stranger in that alley. That's more than just existing." James felt something shift in his chest, a wall he'd built, starting to crumble. "You know, I've spent so long being careful, keeping my head down, staying out of trouble. But when I heard you in that alley," he shook his head. "I didn't think, I just acted." "Faith does that sometimes," Emily said. "Makes us braver than we think we can be. Is that what gave you the courage to speak up for your student?" Emily nodded, her hand still resting on his. "I believe God puts us where we need to be, even when it's scary. Sometimes especially when it's scary." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "When I was up there speaking tonight, I kept thinking about this verse from Isaiah. 'So do not fear, for I am with you.'" "Sarah loved that verse," James said softly. "She'd quote it whenever I worried about money or work, whenever anything seemed impossible." The porch swing continued its gentle motion, creaking in time with the cricket songs. A cool breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree in the front yard, carrying the sweet scent of late summer flowers. "You know what Lily told me yesterday?" Emily asked, her voice warm with affection. "She said she's been praying for someone to help braid her hair. Said she thinks God sent me to answer that prayer." She laughed softly. "Leave it to a child to see things so simply." James felt a smile tugging at his lips. "She's got her mother's heart, that's for sure. Sees right through to the truth of things." He turned to look at Emily. Really look at her. The porch light cast a soft glow on her face, highlighting the kindness in her eyes. "Maybe she's right. Maybe God does answer prayers in ways we don't expect." Emily met his gaze, and something electric passed between them. The night seemed to grow still, holding its breath. James felt his heart beating faster, aware of how close they were sitting, how natural it felt to have her hand in his. "I haven't felt this alive in years," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "When Sarah died, I thought that part of me died too. But being with you, seeing how you are with Lily." He trailed off, overwhelmed by the emotions rising in his chest. Emily squeezed his hand gently. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she was smiling. "God's not finished with your story yet, James Carter." The crickets sang their endless song, and the stars twinkled overhead. James felt peace settling over him like a warm blanket. For the first time in years, he let himself lean back, a genuine smile spreading across his face. The future didn't seem so daunting anymore, not with Emily's hand in his, and the knowledge that sometimes, just sometimes, prayers get answered in the most unexpected ways. The sound of shattering glass shattered the peaceful moment. The sound of shattering glass ripped through the peaceful night. James's heart leaped into his throat as he bolted from the porch, leaving Emily behind. His heavy footsteps thundered across the wooden floors as he rushed to the living room, his mind racing with terrible possibilities. Moonlight streamed through a jagged hole in the front window, glass shards glittering across the carpet like deadly diamonds. In the center lay a large rock wrapped in white paper. James's hands trembled as he carefully picked it up, unwrapping the note. The crude message, written in thick black marker, made his blood run cold. "Next time, it's worse. Daddy?" Lily's small voice came from the hallway. She stood there in her pink pajamas, clutching her stuffed bunny, eyes wide with fear. "I heard a noise." "It's okay, baby," James said, quickly crumpling the note and shoving it in his pocket. He crossed the room and scooped her up in his arms, holding her close. She buried her face in his shoulder, trembling slightly. Emily appeared in the doorway, her face pale in the dim light. "Oh no," she whispered, taking in the broken window and scattered glass. "This is because of me, isn't it?" James couldn't meet her eyes. Instead, he focused on rubbing Lily's back, trying to calm her. "Let's not jump to conclusions," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I saw the note, James," Emily said quietly. "I should go. I can't let this continue, not with Lily here." Lily's head shot up. "No, Miss Emily can't go." She reached out toward Emily, tears welling in her eyes. "Daddy, tell her she can't go." James felt torn in two. His daughter's plea pulled at his heart, but the weight of the crumpled note in his pocket seemed to grow heavier by the second. He gently set Lily down on the couch, careful to keep her away from the glass. "Emily," he started, his voice strained. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's not safe." "So, you're giving up?" Emily's voice cracked with emotion. "After everything you said at church today about standing together?" "I have to think about Lily first," James said, his tone sharper than intended. "These people, they're escalating. A rock today, but what about tomorrow?" "Which is exactly why I need to leave," Emily insisted, wrapping her arms around herself. "I won't be responsible for putting you both in danger." Lily jumped up on the couch, her small face fierce with determination. "But Daddy always says we have to help people. He says that's what Jesus wants us to do." James ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of his daughter's words. The simple faith of a child, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. But reality wasn't that simple, was it? "Baby, sometimes helping people is complicated," he tried to explain. "No, it's not," Lily protested. "You helped Miss Emily because it was right, and now she needs us even more." Emily moved closer, carefully stepping around the glass. "James, I understand. I do. But running away, it's what they want. It means they win. And if they do something worse," James's voice was rough, with barely contained emotion. "If they hurt Lily, I can't." He broke off, the words sticking in his throat. "Then we'll face it together," Emily said softly. "The whole church will stand with us. You saw them today." "The church isn't here at night," James countered. "They can't protect us from—" He gestured at the broken window, frustration evident in every movement. Lily slipped her small hand into his. "But God is here, Daddy. Remember what you always tell me? He's watching over us, even when we're scared." James looked down at his daughter's trusting face, then at Emily's determined one. The moonlight streaming through the broken window cast strange shadows across the floor, like bars of a prison. Was he trapped by fear, or was this a test of faith? "I just want to keep you safe," he whispered, pulling Lily close again. "I know," Emily said, her voice gentle. "But sometimes being safe means standing together, not running away." She paused, then added, "I'll respect whatever decision you make, James, but please don't make it out of fear." James stared at the broken glass scattered across his floor, each piece catching the moonlight like a silent accusation. The choice before him seemed impossible. Risk everything by standing firm, or lose something precious by giving in to fear. The night pressed in around them, waiting for his answer. In the heavy silence, Lily's quiet voice spoke up again. "Daddy, can we pray about it?" James looked at his daughter's earnest face, then at Emily, who had tears shining in her eyes. The broken window let in a cool breeze, stirring the curtains like restless ghosts. His heart ached with the weight of the decision before him, knowing that whatever choice he made would change everything. Morning sunlight crept through the broken window, now covered with a makeshift cardboard patch. The rays cast long shadows across Emily's borrowed guest room as she methodically folded her clothes into her small blue suitcase. Her hands trembled slightly, but her movements were determined, each fold precise and purposeful. "Please don't go." Lily stood in the doorway, her small frame shaking with sobs. Her stuffed bunny, the one she'd lent Emily that first night, dangled from her tight grip. "You can't leave us." Emily paused, a sweater half folded in her hands. She blinked back tears, trying to keep her voice steady. "Lily, sweetheart, I have to. It's not safe for you and your daddy if I stay. But we can protect you." Lily rushed forward, wrapping her arms around Emily's waist. "Daddy's strong, and Pastor Mike said we have to stand up to bad people." James appeared in the doorway, his usually confident posture now heavy with exhaustion. Dark circles rimmed his eyes from a sleepless night of watching over his home. He leaned against the doorframe, his work clothes already on despite it being Sunday. "Lily," he said softly, "give Miss Emily some space." "No." Lily's grip tightened. "You're supposed to help people when they're in trouble. That's what you always tell me." Emily gently unwound Lily's arms and knelt to meet her eyes. "Sometimes helping means knowing when to step back. I love you both too much to let anything happen to you because of me." James crossed the room and placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Baby girl, why don't you go get dressed for church?" "We're still going to church?" Lily looked up at him, confused and hurt. "Yes, we are. God doesn't take Sundays off, and neither do we." Lily's lower lip trembled as she backed away from Emily. "Will you at least stay until after church?" Emily shook her head, her voice catching. "I think it's better if I leave now, while it's early. Fewer people will see me go." Lily burst into fresh tears and ran from the room. The sound of her bedroom door slamming echoed through the house. James and Emily stood in uncomfortable silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Emily returned to her packing, though there wasn't much left to pack. Her fingers brushed against the small Bible James had lent her during her stay. "Keep it," James said, noticing her hesitation. "Seems like you might need it more than me right now." Emily clutched the Bible to her chest. "I'm sorry, James. I never meant for any of this to happen. You don't have to apologize for doing what's right, don't I?" She gestured toward the window. "Look what it's brought to your door. Your home, your daughter, are stronger than you think." James stepped closer, his voice low and intense. "Emily, you don't have to go." "Yes, I do." Emily zipped her suitcase closed with finality. "I've watched you with Lily. I've seen how hard you work to give her a good life, a safe home. I won't be the reason that gets destroyed." James ran a hand over his face, struggling with words he couldn't say. The morning light caught the silver strands in his hair, making him look older than his years. "At least let me drive you somewhere safe." "No," Emily said firmly. "I've already called a taxi. The less connection to you, the better." A car horn sounded from outside. Emily grabbed her suitcase, her movements suddenly hurried. James reached for the bag, but she pulled it back. "Please," she whispered, "don't make this harder than it already island." They walked to the front door together, their footsteps heavy on the creaking floorboards. From somewhere in the house, they could hear Lily's muffled crying. Emily paused at the door, her hand on the knob. "Thank you, James, for everything. For showing me what real courage looks like." "Emily," James started, but she was already opening the door, stepping out into the morning Sunday. He watched from the porch as she walked down the path, her suitcase bumping against her legs. She didn't look back as she climbed into the waiting taxi, and James stood there long after the car had disappeared around the corner. The house felt emptier than it had in years when he went back inside. Lily's sobs had quieted to hiccups, but the silence felt worse somehow. James made his way to his bedroom, closing the door softly behind him. For a long moment, he stood there, staring at the photograph of his late wife on the bedside table. Then, slowly, his knees gave way, and he sank to the floor beside his bed. "Lord," he whispered, his voice breaking, I don't understand. You sent her to us. You let us help her. Why now? Why this? Tears began to fall, dropping onto his clasped hands. I thought I was doing right by standing up with her, by showing Lily what it means to fight for what's good and true. His shoulders shook as he continued to pray. I need your guidance. Show me the path. Is this really your will? To let fear win? To teach my daughter that sometimes evil gets its way? The morning light continued to strengthen outside his window, but James remained on his knees, weeping and praying, searching for answers in the silence of his heart. James sat in his dimly lit kitchen, his late wife's worn Bible open before him. Sleep had eluded him after Emily's departure, leaving him restless and troubled. His fingers traced the familiar pages, stopping at a passage Marie had underlined years ago. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on Marie's handwritten notes in the margins. Her neat script caught his eye. Love drives out fear. Always choose love. James closed his eyes, remembering Marie's unwavering strength in the face of prejudice. She had never backed down, never let fear dictate her choices. The memory of her courage stirred something deep within him. Daddy? Lily stood in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. I miss Emily. James opened his arms, and Lily rushed into them. Me too, baby girl. Then why did we let her go? Lily's voice cracked. You always say we should help people who need help. Her words hit him like a thunderbolt. What example was he setting for his daughter? Running from trouble had never been their way. Marie would have never allowed fear to chase away someone they loved. Sometimes, James said slowly, grown-ups make mistakes trying to protect the people they care about. He looked down at his daughter's questioning face. But you're right, we shouldn't let fear win. James reached for his phone, his heart pounding. He found Emily's number and pressed dial before doubt could stop him. The phone rang 3 times before her voice came through, small and tired. James? Emily, I was wrong. The words tumbled out. I've been teaching Lily to stand up for what's right, to help others, to trust in God's plan. But when things got hard, I let fear take over. He heard her shaky breath on the other line. James, I can't put you and Lily in danger. I won't. The danger isn't from you being here, James said firmly. It's from us letting hate drive us apart. That's exactly what they want. But the threats will only get worse if good people stay silent. James straightened in his chair, feeling stronger with each word. I'm calling Pastor Mike right after this. The church needs to know what's happening. We need to stand together, all of us. There was a long pause. James, I don't want to cause trouble in your church. You're not the one causing trouble. Those men who attacked you, the people threatening us, they're the trouble. And they're counting on our silence. James felt Marie's presence, almost as if she were standing beside him. My late wife used to say that evil wins when good people do nothing. Lily tugged at his sleeve. Can I talk to Emily? James handed her the phone, watching as his daughter's face lit up. Emily, please come back. Daddy says we're going to be brave together. James could hear Emily's voice crack with emotion. Oh, sweetheart, remember when you read me that story about David and Goliath? Lily continued. You said sometimes being brave means standing up to big, scary things. We can be brave like David. James took the phone back, his heart swelling with pride at his daughter's words. She's right, Emily. We can face this together. The whole church community, they need to know what's happening. Most of them are good people. They'll stand with us. How can you be so sure? Emily's voice wavered. Because I've known them for years. They were there for me when Marie passed. They've watched Lily grow up. They know what's right. James paused. And those who don't, well, maybe it's time they learned. He could hear Emily crying softly. I'm so scared, James. I know. I am too, he admitted. But I'm more scared of what happens if we let fear win. If we show Lily that it's okay to run away when things get hard. Your daughter is something special, you know that? James smiled. Just like her mama. Marie would have loved you, Emily. She would have said you're exactly what this family needs. There was a rustling sound on the other end of the line. You really want me to come back? More than anything. James felt his own eyes growing wet. We're stronger together. And whatever comes next, we'll face it as a family. The word family hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. Okay, Emily whispered, her voice gaining strength. Okay, I'll come back. Lily, who had been listening intently, let out a squeal of joy. James laughed, feeling lighter than he had in days. I'll come pick you up from the motel, he said. Just come home, Emily. The tears in her voice were evident as she replied, Home. I like the sound of that. As James hung up the phone, Lily threw her arms around his neck. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you. He hugged her tight, looking at Marie's Bible still open on the table. The morning sun seemed brighter now, warming the kitchen with hope and purpose. They would face whatever came next together, with faith, love, and courage, just as Marie would have wanted. The wooden pews of the small church creaked as James and Emily sat across from Pastor Miller in his office. Afternoon sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the worn carpet. The pastor's weathered face was thoughtful as he listened to their story. So you see, Pastor, James said, his voice steady despite his racing heart, we can't let fear win. Not this time. Emily nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. These threats, this hatred, it affects all of us. But if we stand together, Pastor Miller leaned forward, his eyes kind but serious. A peaceful march through town. It's bold. There could be pushback. There already is pushback, James replied. But Marie, my late wife, she always said that love has to be braver than hate. The pastor's face softened at the mention of Marie. He'd known her well, had seen her strength firsthand. After a moment's reflection, he pressed the intercom button on his desk. Sarah, could you call the church council members? Emergency meeting in 30 minutes. Within the hour, the small office was packed with familiar faces. Mrs. Henderson from the choir stood near the window, while Deacon Williams leaned against the filing cabinet. The room hummed with murmured conversations as Emily shared her experience, her voice growing stronger with each word. We need to show that this town stands for something better, she concluded, looking around the room. That love is stronger than hate. One by one, the council members voiced their support. Mrs. Henderson suggested they sing hymns during the march. Deacon Williams offered to handle security. Even timid Mr. Peterson, who rarely spoke at meetings, volunteered to print flyers at his copy shop. Love thy neighbor, Pastor Miller reminded them, isn't just a suggestion, it's a command. They spent the next hour planning. Tables were pushed together in the fellowship hall, covered with papers and coffee cups. James watched as Emily worked alongside church members, her earlier hesitation replaced by determination. She belonged here, he realized. She belonged with them. Lily sat at a smaller table nearby, surrounded by art supplies. Look, Daddy, she called out, holding up a poster. In careful letters, she had written, Love Wins, and decorated it with hearts and doves. Can I make more? Of course, baby, James smiled, his heart swelling with pride. Other children soon joined her, turning the corner into an art station filled with giggles and creativity. Throughout the afternoon, more people arrived. Word had spread quickly in their small town. Some came with questions, others with concerns, but most came ready to help. Mrs. Rodriguez from the Mexican grocery store promised to bring her whole family. Mr. Chen from the hardware store offered to provide water bottles for the marchers. Not everyone was supportive. James overheard whispered doubts. It might make things worse. What if there's trouble? Maybe we should just let it be. But for every fearful voice, there were two voices of courage. Emily moved among the groups, answering questions and sharing her vision of unity. James watched her gentle persistence win over even the most hesitant supporters. She had a way of helping people see past their fears to something bigger. We'll start at the church, Pastor Miller announced, pointing to a map spread across the table. March down Main Street, past the school where Emily teaches, and end at the town square. Simple, visible, peaceful. They prepared carefully. Deacon Williams organized marshals for crowd control. The choir director selected hymns that spoke of love and justice. Mr. Heddes, Peterson's flyers began circulating. Walk for unity, because love is stronger than hate. As evening approached, Lily's art station had produced dozens of signs. Children's artwork covered the tables, each piece a colorful testament to hope. Can we put them somewhere safe until tomorrow? Lily asked, carefully stacking her creations. We'll keep them right here in the church, Pastor Miller assured her, helping gather the signs. Right next to the pulpit. Before leaving, they formed a circle and joined hands. Pastor Miller's prayer was simple but powerful. Lord, give us courage, give us wisdom, and most of all, give us love. The parking lot was nearly empty when James, Emily, and Lily finally headed home. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. Emily carried a stack of flyers, while Lily clutched her favorite poster. Are you scared? Lily asked as they walked, looking up at both adults. Emily squeezed her hand. A little, but being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means doing what's right anyway. Back home, James helped Lily get ready for bed. She insisted on propping her Love Wins sign against her bedroom wall so I can see it first thing tomorrow. As he tucked her in, Lily's small face grew serious. Daddy, will we really be okay tomorrow? James sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. He thought about the community that had gathered today, about the strength they'd found in unity, about the love that was already overcoming fear. We'll be safe, he promised softly, pulling her blanket up. Together, the morning sun painted the church parking lot in warm golden light. Dew still clung to the grass as people began arriving, their footsteps breaking the early silence. James stood at the church steps, watching as families emerged from their cars carrying handmade signs. His heart swelled at the sight of elderly Mrs. Thompson, who needed her grandson's help to walk but insisted on being present. Emily stood beside him, her fingers intertwined with his. She wore a simple blue dress and a determined expression. I never imagined so many would come, she whispered. Lily bounced excitedly between them, clutching her carefully painted sign that read Love Wins in rainbow letters. She had spent all evening getting the colors just right, refusing to go to bed until every letter was perfect. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. The hymn started softly from the church choir members who had gathered near the steps. Other voices joined in, growing stronger with each verse. The sound wrapped around them like a warm embrace. Pastor Miller stepped forward, his Bible tucked under his arm. Let us pray before we begin, he called out, and heads bowed in unified reverence. The crowd had swelled to over 200 people. Black and white faces mingled together, all wearing expressions of peaceful determination. Children clutched their parents' hands, elderly couples supported each other, and teenagers helped distribute water bottles. Remember, James addressed the gathering, his deep voice carrying across the parking lot. We walk in peace. We walk in love. We walk together. A police cruiser pulled up, and Officer Martinez stepped out, nodding respectfully to James. We'll be with you the whole way, she assured him. The route is secured. The procession began moving forward, spreading across Main Street in a river of humanity. Signs bobbed above heads. United we stand. God's love knows no color. Hate has no home here. The hymns continued, voices lifting in harmony that echoed off storefront windows. Emily squeezed James's hand as they led the march. Her eyes glistened with tears, but her steps were steady. Thank you, she whispered, though the words seemed inadequate for the depth of her gratitude. They had walked about 3 blocks when James spotted them. Marcus and Todd stood at the corner of Pine Street, their faces twisted with anger. Behind them, a small group of men shifted restlessly, clutching crude signs of their own. James felt Emily tense beside him, but she didn't falter. Lily noticed them too. Daddy? Her voice wavered slightly. Keep singing, sweetheart, James said gently. Just keep singing. The hymn grew louder as they approached the corner. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Hundreds of voices joined together, drowning out any possibility of hate. Officer Martinez and her colleagues moved smoothly to position themselves between the marchers and the angry group. Marcus took a step forward, his face red with fury, but stopped short as he realized how outnumbered they were. The marchers continued past them, their song never wavering. Some people even smiled at the angry men, offering waves of peace that seemed to confuse them more than any confrontation would have. I once was lost, but now am found. The words echoed off buildings and seemed to fill the entire town. Store owners stepped out onto sidewalks. Some watched in surprise, others joined the march. A young mother with tears in her eyes reached out to hold Emily's other hand. They reached the town square, where more people waited to join them. The crowd had grown so large that the front of the march reached the fountain, while the back still stretched several blocks behind. James looked back at the sea of faces, neighbors, friends, strangers, all united. The morning sun caught the mist from the fountain, creating a rainbow that arched over the gathering. Someone started a new hymn, and it rippled through the crowd like a wave of hope. Up, Lily tugged at his sleeve, her eyes shining. James lifted her onto his shoulders, her small hands gripping his forehead for balance. She raised her sign high above her head, and the crowd cheered in response. Emily wrapped her arm around James's waist, and together they stood as the town erupted in applause and joyful shouts. The angry men had disappeared, their hatred no match for such an overwhelming display of love and unity. Lily's voice rang out clear and pure above the crowd as she joined the hymn, her sign waving gently in the morning breeze. James felt tears on his cheeks but didn't try to hide them. All around them, the town continued to cheer, their voices rising in celebration of love's triumph over fear. The morning paper rustled in James's weathered hands as he sat at his kitchen table. Steam rose from his coffee mug, curling in the early sunlight that streamed through the window. His eyes fixed on the headline, "Local Men Arrested for Hate Crimes." Below it, a photo showed Marcus and Todd being led away in handcuffs. James took a slow breath, letting the weight of the moment settle. The kitchen clock ticked steadily on the wall, marking time in this quiet space where so much had changed. Lily's breakfast dishes still sat in the sink. She'd rushed off to school earlier, excited about show and tell day. He spread the paper flat, reading the details carefully. Multiple witnesses had come forward after the march, providing evidence that couldn't be ignored. The article mentioned Emily's initial attack, the vandalism, and the threatening notes. It felt surreal, seeing their ordeal laid out in black and white. A gentle knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Through the screen door, he saw Emily standing on the porch, holding a paper bag from the local bakery. Her face looked brighter than he'd seen it in weeks. "I thought you might want company while reading the news," she said as he opened the door. The familiar scent of cinnamon rolls wafted from the bag. James smiled, gesturing for her to come in. Perfect timing. Coffee's fresh. Emily set the bag on the table and pulled out 2 enormous sticky buns. As she settled into the chair across from James, her eyes caught the newspaper headline. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out to touch the page. "It doesn't feel real," she whispered. "After all those weeks of looking over my shoulder." James reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "It's real. They can't hurt anyone anymore." Emily's eyes welled with tears, but her smile remained steady. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been there that night. If you hadn't stopped to help a stranger. God put us on that street for a reason," James said softly. He poured her a cup of coffee, adding the splash of cream she preferred. "Though I admit, I didn't expect it would lead to all this." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sharing breakfast and letting the morning sun warm them. The kitchen felt different somehow, lighter, as if a shadow had finally lifted. "Pastor Roberts called this morning," Emily said, breaking off a piece of her cinnamon roll. "He wants to hold a special service on Sunday, a celebration of community and healing." James nodded. "The whole town needs it, I think. A chance to acknowledge what happened and move forward together. Some of my students' parents who never spoke to me before stopped by my classroom yesterday," Emily continued. "They brought cookies and apologized for not speaking up sooner." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. One mother hugged me and said her daughter finally feels safe at school. James felt his own eyes growing moist. Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air, to show people what really matters. Emily stood up suddenly, walking to the window. Her shoulders shook slightly. I need to thank you, James, not just for that first night, but for everything after, for believing in me, for standing beside me when it would have been easier to walk away. James rose and moved to stand behind her. The morning light caught in her hair, making it glow like honey. You don't need to thank me. You showed this town what courage looks like. You showed Lily what it means to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. Emily turned to face him, tears tracking down her cheeks. Your family gave me strength when I had none left, you and Lily. You became my anchor in the storm. James reached up and gently brushed away her tears with his thumb. The touch was tender, full of unspoken meaning. Emily leaned into his hand, closing her eyes. We're better together, James said softly. All of us. Emily opened her eyes and met his gaze. The morning light wrapped around them both as James slowly drew her into his arms. She fit there perfectly, her head resting against his chest. He could feel her heart beating, steady and strong. A small gasp from the doorway made them both look up. Lily stood there in her school clothes, having forgotten her lunchbox. Her face broke into a radiant smile at the sight of them together. James and Emily didn't spring apart like guilty teenagers. Instead, they simply opened their arms, making space for Lily to join them. She rushed forward, wrapping her arms around them both. I came back from my lunch, Lily explained, her voice muffled against Emily's dress. But this is better. The three of them stood there in the sunlit kitchen, holding each other close. The newspaper on the table proclaimed justice, but in this embrace, they found something even more precious, the promise of tomorrow and all the hope it held. Through the window, birds sang in the maple tree, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of approaching spring. The morning light poured in, wrapping around the three of them like a blessing. The kitchen buzzed with warm, familiar sounds that James hadn't heard in years. The gentle clink of plates, the sizzle of food on the stovetop, and most precious of all, Lily's carefree laughter. Emily stood at the stove, stirring a pot of her grandmother's chicken and dumplings, while Lily carefully arranged 3 plates on the wooden table, making sure each setting was perfect. James leaned against the doorframe, taking in the scene before him. Emily wore one of his late wife's old aprons, a simple blue cotton one with tiny flowers, that Lily had shyly offered her last week. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she hummed softly as she cooked, swaying slightly to her own melody. The napkins go on the left, sweetheart, Emily gently corrected as Lily set the table. His daughter's face scrunched up in concentration as she carefully moved each napkin to its proper place. Like this? Lily asked, beaming when Emily nodded in approval. The sight squeezed James's heart in the best possible way. For so long their house had felt empty, even with Lily's vibrant presence. But now, watching Emily and Lily work together in such perfect harmony, he realized their home had slowly filled with something he'd thought was lost forever, the warmth of a complete family. Daddy, stop standing there like a statue, Lily giggled, breaking his reverie. Come help me with the glasses. Emily looked up then, catching his eye. Her smile held such tenderness that James felt his chest tighten. Yes, Mr. Carter, she teased. Make yourself useful. James chuckled and pushed off from the doorframe. Yes, ma'am, he replied, moving to the cabinet to retrieve 3 glasses. As he passed behind Emily, he caught the scent of her lavender shampoo mixed with the savory aroma of dinner. Lily bounced on her toes as she watched Emily ladle the chicken and dumplings into a serving bowl. It smells just like Grandma Rita's, she exclaimed. Remember when we visited her last month, Emily? And she taught us her secret recipe? James paused in placing the glasses, struck by how naturally Lily included Emily in their memories now, as if she'd always been there. The weekend visit to Emily's grandmother had been a turning point. Watching his daughter bond with Emily's family had filled him with a hope he hadn't dared to name. All right, everyone seated, Emily announced, carrying the steaming bowl to the table. Careful, it's hot. They settled into their usual places, James at the head of the table, Lily to his right, and Emily to his left. It struck him how automatic this arrangement had become, how right it felt to have Emily in what had once been Marie's chair. Steam rose from their bowls as Emily served them each a portion. Lily wiggled in her seat, impatient to start but knowing they always prayed first. James reached for Emily's hand on one side, and Lily's on the other, ready to say grace. But before he could begin, Lily burst out with the question that had clearly been bubbling inside her all evening. "Daddy, can we keep her?" James's eyes flew open, meeting Emily's startled gaze across the table. Her cheeks flushed pink, but her eyes shone with unmistakable joy and hope. In that moment of suspended time, everything crystallized for James. The laughter that now filled their home, the quiet conversations on the porch after Lily was asleep, the way Emily's hand felt in his, the peace he felt when they were all together. Lily continued, her words tumbling out in excitement. "She already has her own drawer in the bathroom, and she helps me with homework, and she makes the best pancakes on Saturdays, and she knows how to braid my hair just right, and—" "Lily," James said gently, squeezing her small hand. But he couldn't help the smile that spread across his face as his eyes remained locked with Emily's. The love he saw reflected there matched the fullness in his own heart. "Sorry," Lily whispered, though she didn't look sorry at all. "Can we pray now?" James cleared his throat, suddenly aware of the moisture in his eyes. "Yes, baby. Let's pray." They bowed their heads, hands clasped together in a circle of three. The moment felt holy, filled with possibility and promise. James's deep voice filled the kitchen. "Dear Lord, we thank you for this food and the hands that prepared it. We thank you for your protection and guidance through difficult times. We thank you for bringing us together and showing us that love can bloom even in the darkest moments. Most of all, we thank you for the gift of family, not just the one we're born into, but the one you lead us to. Amen." "Amen," Emily and Lily echoed softly. When James opened his eyes, he found Emily dabbing at hers with her napkin, while Lily looked between them with a knowing smile that seemed far too wise for her 10 years. The room fell quiet, except for the gentle clink of spoons against bowls. But it wasn't an awkward silence. It was the comfortable quiet of a family sharing a meal together, each heart full with the knowledge that something precious had been acknowledged. In their joined hands during that prayer, they had felt the subtle shift from what might be to what would be. James watched as Emily helped Lily blow on a too-hot spoonful of soup, the simple gesture so maternal and natural. His daughter's earlier question echoed in his mind. Can we keep her? Looking at the two most important people in his world sitting at his table, James knew the answer had been written in his heart long before Lily asked. Their home, once hollow with grief, now hummed with life and love. The empty chairs had been filled, the quiet spaces brightened with laughter. As they shared their meal together, the evening light golden through the windows, James felt a peace settle over him that he hadn't known since Marie's passing. Here, in this kitchen that had seen so many changes, their future was taking shape. One built on faith, strengthened by trials, and overflowing with love. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Marcus Williams, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.